dive into the concepts, the techniques, and all the things you need to know to get a great foundation and start with watercolor. I am Jessica Sanders, and I am your teacher, mentor, leader in this little endeavor we're going on, this journey, and I am excited that you're here. So I'll share a little bit about myself. I am a watercolor and mixed media artist. My home base is colormecreativeart.com, and I not only make art, but I teach art. I teach art online primarily. I've done a little bit of in-person instruction, but mostly it's online. And I also have a lovely membership community. So that's a new thing for me, kind of an experiment. I'm into experiments this year. My art style is loose and sketchy, kind of abstract, some hints of realism in there. And I just really like to play and have fun and enjoy painting, enjoy drawing, enjoy my art process. And that's, a big thing that I want to share with you. So we're going to learn watercolor. You want to learn watercolor, but you're not quite sure where to start? Well, you're in the right place, because I'm going to teach you all the things you need to know to get a great start with watercolor, and things that I wish I had known when I started. So let me tell you a little story. When I first tried watercolor, which was quite a few years ago, well, I don't know, 5 years ago, something like that. I don't know when it was exactly. But when I first tried watercolor, I knew nothing about it. I didn't even know that I needed watercolor paper. I just had some paints, I had some mixed media paper, and I thought, I'm just going to try this and see what happens. And honestly, it was terrible. And I was like, I don't know if I like this stuff. I don't think I like it. And so I set it aside. Now, that's kind of happened to me for other parts of my art journey with my sketching and sort of thing. Like, I try it and be dissatisfied and then set it aside for a while and then come back to it later on with maybe fresh eyes. So that's what I did with watercolor as well. I just thought this watercolor was like, not to insult any kindergartners, but I felt the painting that I made with watercolor that day was a kindergartner could do it, and it just was really not good. And so I didn't know if I wanted to paint with watercolor. But I came back to it sometime later, probably a couple of years later, honestly, and I had a little more knowledge then. I knew more about what I needed. I had done a little more research instead of just going, oh, I'll just try this and not research anything. Anyway, and I knew, I needed some watercolor, and I knew I needed paper, and I approached it more as an exploration rather than a, hey, let me paint this picture and see how it turns out. And you know what? I loved the medium. I fell in love with it that time, because of the movement and the effects you can get and the light that you can capture and see in it. And I often mix it with mixed media, but I still just love watercolor. And I had those points of confusion, right? It's been a learning process along the way, and I still am learning. I will tell you that. I feel like I'm constantly learning on this creative art journey that I'm on. And I love that. I love that. So what I wanted to share with you, though, is if you want to learn watercolor, all the basics, you're in the right place. So in this class, I'm going to walk you through step by step in a sequence that makes sense how to get started with watercolor. So I have some supply recommendations for you. I'm going to start by teaching you how to first set up your watercolor palette, and then we'll talk about all the basics of watercolor. So how to move your paint from the paint pan to the palette, how to pick up water and thin your paint, why you're getting like that little ring around your paint, your thing you painted, how much water to use, how much is too much, how much is too little, and the different values you can get, the different consistencies of watercolor. And so we're going to talk about all these basics over the first few days, and then when we get to the end of the last few days of the workshop, we'll start talking about things like watercolor washes, and I'll share with you the different watercolor washes. And then we're going to have like a big finale day, the last day, where we're going to talk about techniques. And we're going to talk about lifting, we're going to talk about glazing, we're going to talk about, I have a whole list, like there's a lot of techniques, y'all, and even some special effects you can get with watercolor. Okay, so this is a really all-inclusive get started with watercolor class. There's going to be a lot of information in here. But here's the thing, we're going to do it day by day. So this is a 10-day workshop, and each day we're going to build on what we did the day before. So as I said, we'll start out just by talking about supplies and putting together our paint palette, and then we'll work up to knowing how to use our paint, how much water, and then eventually by day 10, the techniques. I'm going to give you the weekends off as well. So on the weekends, we'll have our Facebook group, and on the weekends, we'll just share and play, and I'll give you a little bit of time. There are 2 weekends built into this 10-day workshop, and it will give you time to share what you're working on and to ask your questions. All right. So those are the things we're going to learn. I am super excited. I didn't list every single thing, but just to give you an idea of what's in here, I wanted to share that with you. I'm excited. We're going to have a great time learning all the basics of watercolor, and by the time you finish this class, you're going to have this really strong foundation for watercolor. And it's going to give you a springboard so that you can paint some really beautiful paintings, and you'll understand what's going on